Let's just start with you. And then let's trace things all the way back. I mean, way back. Past your parents, your grandparents. Keep going. Past the powdered wigs, the suits of armor, the woolly mammoths. All the way back until we find some ancient ancestor squatting in the dirt. That person, that's where your story begins. And you have to understand, if that person, or any one of the thousands of people in the unbroken chain between them and you, if any of them had tripped at the wrong moment, or gotten eaten by something with big teeth, or just didn't find a partner, well, you just wouldn't exist. Your very existence is a staggering miracle of survival.
You're not just here because of luck. No. You are the end product of a series of violent coincidences and just incredibly stubborn biology. You are an unbroken chain of people who survived the absolute worst this planet could possibly throw at them.
So that's the real question, isn't it? How close did you actually come to never existing? Well, let's find out. We're going to count down the 5 deadliest periods in all of human history, the moments where your ancestral line was stretched to its absolute breaking point. All right, coming in at number 5, we're going way, way back to a time when the entire world was actively trying to freeze you to death. Welcome to the last ice age. We're talking massive ice sheets, some 2 miles thick, covering huge chunks of the planet. The average global temperature dropped about 10 degrees Fahrenheit, which basically turned the world into a vast frozen wasteland where just finding your next meal was a full-time life or death struggle. Can you imagine your daily to-do list? It was brutal. Forget about work deadlines. Your number one goal was don't freeze to death. For dinner, you're hunting a 6-ton mammoth with basically a pointy stick, while also trying to avoid becoming dinner for a giant cave lion. And if you got a simple cut, there were no antibiotics. A small infection could be an absolute death sentence. Okay, so humanity somehow survived the ice. Things have to get better from here, right? Well, what if I told you the next big threat came from an idea that seemed brilliant, but actually made life a whole lot harder? So about 10,000 years ago, somebody had this game-changing thought. You know, instead of chasing our food all over the place, why don't we make our food come to us? And just like that, the age of agriculture began. People settled down, they planted crops, built villages. Sounds like a huge upgrade, right? Well, not exactly. See, here's the problem nobody saw coming. The old hunter-gatherer diet was incredibly varied, lots of protein, tons of different nutrients. But early farmers, they started relying on just a few staple crops. And that shift meant their diet became way less diverse, which led to vitamin deficiencies, anemia, and, as skeletons from the time show, just catastrophic dental problems. And having a permanent address brought a whole new set of dangers. When you crowd people together in villages, diseases can suddenly spread like wildfire. And when you're totally dependent on your crops, one bad drought or a flood could wipe out your entire food supply, leading to mass starvation. It was a huge gamble. Now for our 3rd deadliest period. The threat wasn't nature, and it wasn't a well-intentioned but flawed idea. No, this time, the apocalypse came on horseback. Back in the 13th century, if you saw a dust cloud on the horizon, you had about 3 minutes to completely panic. Led by the legendary Genghis Khan, the Mongols carved out the largest land empire in the history of the world. And their strategy was terrifyingly simple. Show up fast, hit unbelievably hard, and leave nothing and no one standing. Entire cities were literally wiped off the map. The sheer scale of the devastation is it's hard to even wrap your head around. Historians estimate that the Mongol invasions killed around 10% of the entire global population at the time. Your ancestors survived a man-made storm of almost unimaginable destruction. From a human storm, we now turn to a biological one. Our number 2 spot goes to an enemy that was invisible, silent, and 100 times more deadly. In 1347, the bubonic plague arrived in Europe. It was carried by fleas on rats that were hiding on merchant ships. In a world that had absolutely no concept of germ theory or even basic hygiene, it spread like wildfire. Survival became a terrifying random lottery. The Black Death wiped out somewhere between 30 and 60% of Europe's entire population. Think about that. In just a few short years, maybe half the people you knew were just gone. Entire villages were abandoned. Economies completely collapsed. Society itself was right on the brink of falling apart. The symptoms were the stuff of nightmares. And in the face of this absolute terror, you had doctors walking around in those now iconic, creepy bird masks. They'd stuff the beaks with herbs thinking it would protect them. It didn't work. And yet somehow, in the middle of all that chaos and death, your ancestors made it through.
So we've seen ice, we've seen famine, war, and plague. But the number one worst time to be born was an event so catastrophic it came terrifyingly close to erasing our species from the planet for good.
About 74,000 years ago, a supervolcano called Toba, in what is now Indonesia, erupted. And when I say erupted, I mean with a force thousands of times more powerful than any volcanic eruption in recorded history. This wasn't a local disaster. This was a planetary-level event. The eruption blasted so much ash into the atmosphere that it literally blocked out the sun for somewhere between 6 and 10 years. Imagine that. No sun for a decade. Global temperatures plummeted, plants died, animals starved, and entire ecosystems just collapsed. For the few early humans alive at the time, it was the apocalypse.
The human population crashed. It cratered. It's estimated that fewer than 3,000 humans were left alive on the entire planet. That's not a city, that's a small town. We were pushed through a genetic bottleneck so tight that every single person alive today is descended from that tiny, desperate handful of survivors.
Just try to imagine it, living in near total darkness, freezing cold, starving, with absolutely no idea if the sun would ever come back. It is the bleakest scenario you can possibly imagine. And yet somehow, that small band of our ancestors just refused to give up. They endured. And that brings us right back to you. Your existence isn't some happy accident. It is the end result of an impossibly long line of survivors, people who outlasted ice ages, famines, plagues, and a volcanic winter that almost extinguished the human flame entirely. You're not just a descendant of survivors. You are the miracle they were fighting for. So it leaves you with a final thought, doesn't it? Every generation has its own challenges, its own battles, its own seemingly impossible odds. The story of human survival isn't over. The only question is, what will our chapter in that story look like?